Welcome to another episode of Corporate CPR, where we breathe life back into your organization, projects, and processes, giving you insights to recovery and avoiding corporate mortality events. Today, we'll be talking about how misinterpreting the work from home trends might be killing your company. And joining us to contribute to the conversation is Denis O'Shea. Welcome, Denis.
Thank you, Jana. Nice to be on the show again.
Yeah, I'm glad you could come back. So can you share a little bit about your background real quick?
Oh, sure. I'm a recovered engineer. I spent many years in engineering, and I don't do much engineering anymore, but I run an IT company that does a lot of engineering work. And we've got a very strong interest in finding the balance between security and productivity for companies who work remotely. That's also the work we do these days. So we've got a very strong interest in understanding how people work with technology and how to make them more productive and more safe and in a hybrid work environment specifically.
Yeah, and so you have been on the show before, so let's talk a little bit about where you've been in the past couple of years and what you've been up to.
Yeah, so we spoke 2 years ago, and we were all coming out of the pandemic back then. We had done a round of research to understand how were people actually working as, their hybrid work configuration, working from home. And we got some interesting stuff, which I shared with you then. We've repeated the research and we extended it. And we got a whole bunch of additional information, which I'm happy to share with you today. And it shows us that if we look at superficially, hybrid work has not changed in the last 2 years. Now, the pandemic's pretty much gone, and everyone's working the way they were still working 2 years ago. Same percentage of people working from home, the office, other locations. What's changed enormously is how people feel about their work, their productivity, their personal privacy, their security. So massive changes in the perception of the employees that employers should know about. No change in the physical attributes of where we work and the percentage of time we spend in the office or at home.
So sorry, your initial study was coming out of the pandemic, and so you're saying the hybrid mix, or the amount working from home, et cetera, is the same as it was about 2 years ago?
Yeah, it is. It's remarkable. So we haven't seen a big drift back to the office, and we haven't seen any major change in that mix of home and office-based working. The shift has been the attitudinal shift and the perceptive shift that's happened to employees and what they now perceive to be important in a company.
So before we, I guess, jump into that, have you seen any attitude shifts then in leadership of organizations around? Because, a couple of things. So obviously what you see a lot on LinkedIn are these fights, right, against people who are interested in working from home or being hybrid, and companies who are saying, no, you need to return to work. Some of that is, I think the one that gets talked about a lot is distrust, right? Like, how do I know what you're doing? I don't know that that's actually the biggest driver, though. From a corporation perspective, I kind of think the biggest drivers are the loss of collaboration, the loss of tribal knowledge. Well, tribal knowledge probably not the right word, but like learning by osmosis, right? Learning because you're sitting around other people and you pick up on things that you wouldn't hear or see. And so I think that's actually why companies are interested in returning to work. But anyway, have you seen trends around that before we talk about the employee side?
We have, and some of what we've seen is quite alarming. So we give people 5 things to force rank. We said, choose these in order of hierarchy, and in the hierarchy of priorities. And it was your personal well-being, your pay and benefits, job satisfaction, ability to work remotely, and company culture. And it was amazing. Personal well-being was the number one by a country mile. So people working in the home office on their own most of the time, the focus is mainly my well-being and how I'm doing. The last thing in what the way they ranked those things was company culture, and it was also second last. So company last and second last. And so that tells us a lot. And then we had a related set of questions around, we asked people how often they meet co-workers in person.
Mm-hmm.
And a study was done in Australia, the UK, and the USA. And we got remarkably similar results from Australia and the UK about how often people meet their co-workers in person. It was like 2-3 times a year, something like that. And the States, remarkably lower. No, the US is about the same size as Australia, some of the same geo challenges, but Americans just not meeting in person in the same way the people in Australia and the UK.
Well, but Australia has like 30 million people and they're all around the coasts versus the US is spread throughout and so it actually is much easier. Like for instance, we're actually in those 3 countries. And we have about 20 team members in Australia. And it's really easy for us to do, like we did a holiday party. We just have to go do one in the Brisbane Gold Coast area, do one in Sydney and do one in Melbourne. And actually we did 2 because we only have a couple people in Sydney. So we shipped them to one of the other locations for this party. And it was really simple versus in the States, I think we're in 35 states. And so we did a grouping. I actually did an analysis recently to say, okay, how could we go as senior leaders, go visit all of those people? And it'll take about 8 trips to get where people are all closely congregated, that we could bring some people together, which it just goes to show you how much more difficult it is with the US population being spread across.
So you're right in that, but the fact that people are meeting quite infrequent and they're sitting at home in the home office environment, the focus is on self. And people experience their company now through a couple of screens on their desk. That's their window to their boss and their colleagues and their company. And it's all through meetings, Teams, Zoom, whatever. And what they're missing is all the informal conversations that used to happen at the water cooler, the coffee machine, in the kitchen, the pub on a Friday evening, going for lunches, and knowing what other people in the company do and who these people are. And just having all those informal conversations that provide context to the work people do. And in a particular, Gen Z is super interesting to observe because, as you know, Gen Z came into the workforce during the pandemic. They had a pretty rough start, right? Coming in during a pandemic, had to be onboarded remotely and all that. Now they've been in the workforce 2-3 years, and they're struggling. We've got a lot of data to show Gen Z is struggling. And it's really important for us to understand them because by 2035, guess what? They're going to dominate the entire workforce. Almost all the boomer generation would have retired. So we lose all the wisdom, all that institutional knowledge, all the people who built the physical world we live in would have left the workforce. The millennials would be aging out. Gen Z will run the show. And so if we can understand their attitudes, their perceptions, what they bring to the workforce, we can predict the future. And anticipate what the work will be like, and I feel like we've got an obligation to make sure we set them up for success. The way we've done it thus far, having them work remotely in a home office that started during a pandemic, and experiencing culture, colleagues, their boss through a couple of screens on the desk, not the best. Not the best way to start the career trajectory for the people who are going to hopefully succeed us and go on and do great things.
Yeah, we've had that challenge actually. So we've always been 100% remote, just the nature of the work we do, because if you're going to be anywhere, you're going to be in the client's office. And we did an intern program. Now our interns are mixed. We do have some Gen Zers in that, but we also have people who are doing career transitions. And that's exactly what prompted me to think about like how much you lose not being in office, because if you were in an office, you could just have them sit in a desk next to you and observe what you're doing and eavesdrop onto conference calls and listen to these client engagements, and they could learn so much versus when they're remote. You can't sneak them on a call, right? Like the people know why they're there. And so you have to explain why these people are there. and you can forget about them. It's really easy to forget that they're sitting somewhere, um, doing something or not doing something. And even if they have a buddy, right, it makes it very difficult. So we were fortunate that we had very gracious interns, because I think we had a lot of missteps in our first round of doing because it's really hard. It takes a lot more effort to engage somebody when they're remote,
Yes.
in that intern type program.
Yeah. You've got to be so much more deliberate and structured in how you go
Mm,
about it. Yeah.
mm,
Yeah. And what we found through our research is that people, you've seen the studies, I'm sure, that say that people would accept a lower salary to be able to work remotely because they
mm,
receive. Yeah. But our research shows that people feel like they will be more productive in an office than at home. And so when we asked people, where do you do your best work and feel most productive? That was the wording of the question. Your best work and feel most productive. 38% of people said in their home, 58% of people in the office, which
wow.
was extraordinary. That threw us. We did not expect that. And
Mm-mm.
then we hacked that to figure out what's driving that. And we had a bunch of questions around their onboarding experience and then how they get support and the tools they have, and the tools that they're given to be productive. And what we found is the onboarding experience was pretty lousy. Even 2 years, 3 years out of the pandemic, onboarding for remote employees is funky. It's
Mm.
2.5 days to get their devices set up. It requires 2 to 3 service desk tickets. And then we found that when we asked about getting support from your colleagues or IT to get set up, all that went backwards in the last 2 years. So the
Mm.
time it takes to get somebody to respond to your call or your request for help has, deteriorated. And then people's use of self-service tools is not growing as we expected. So what we're finding is that people, when we ask people, do you feel like you've been set up for success during your onboarding experience with all your devices and technology? And the answer is not great, not positive.
Mm.
For all problems.
And did you find differences in those answers between generations, or was it fairly consistent response?
Surprisingly, the boomer generation was quite positive. But maybe it's because they've been in the workforce quite a long time. They've learned how to do things. Gen Z seems to have the greatest issues. Takes Gen Z the longest to set up their devices. They seem to have the slowest experience with getting support. That they seem to be struggling the most. And
Mm. And
so,
so they want to return to an office to some
yeah,
extent.
yeah, it was unbelievable. We were quite surprised. I mean, Gen Z expresses that strong desire to be able to work
Mm.
remote, but yet they feel like they would be more productive if they were in an office setting.
Mm. And so did you measure the sentiment at all then about maybe more hybrid approaches then, where you do get to work from home, say 3 days a week, and you're in the office two or something like that?
We measured all the data around that. We got
Mm.
all that data on the days people work in and out of the office and all the different
Mm.
locations. We didn't collect sentiment related to all those different, variations. Um, we did get some really interesting data around how people are kind of coping. They
Mm.
don't feel like they're well set up. So what are people actually doing? And some of the stuff we got is quite alarming. If you work in a corporate environment and you're responsible for security, there's some of the data from the research which is quite alarming. We found that younger generation, Gen Z and the younger millennials, about 40% of them are giving their work devices to other family members to play with. So, a lot of them
Oh,
using a laptop,
wow.
the kids to do gaming because it's size bad for a
Mm.
laptop, and same with the smartphone. And then we found this incredible mashup of their personal devices and their work devices. And the way we
Mm.
kind of approached the research was, if this sounds creepy, but if you could stand outside someone's home office and peek in the window to see what's on their desk, how many devices, and then if you could find out how many of those are personal and how many are work devices, and what cloud applications are they using, and how are they managing their passwords, and what's actually going on in their environment, that would be super interesting. And so we asked a whole bunch of questions to unpack that, and we found that people are doing work on personal devices with no security. So that's forwarding work emails and documents to an unsecured MacBook or other devices, and they're working in Dropbox and Gmail. And so completely outside the perimeter of the work environment. And they're doing this for more than an hour a day. And then we found an incredible mashup between people's work passwords and personal passwords, which is scary. Very scary for people working in security. So there's a whole bunch of behaviors happening 2-3 years into hybrid work that are not healthy, but they're just.
Yeah, well, so we've had those issues ourselves where you stumble on people using 2 laptops, or another one I had was we were an office and Office 365 environment, and I was getting documents to me in the Gmail, or not Gmail, but whatever, Google Sheets or whatever, and I'm like, I do not want any of our data, and because that's not within our domain, and I've had to have conversations with people about that. Do you think any of that is driven again from maybe have not worked in an office environment? Because because for me, I actually even lock my laptop at home, and there's nobody I'm trying to really lock it against, but I've always been in the habit, you walk away from your computer, you lock your computer, because when I worked in health insurance, we would have audits, right? People would walk around computers and try to find computers that weren't locked. So do you think they've lost, that there's some of that being lost because we don't have the same training at a home environment?
Yeah, and it's really interesting the way you framed it. And you worked in a corporate environment where security was important. We've got a whole bunch of people joining the workforce now that never worked in a corporate environment and had that experience. They possibly came out of education, the education system, where they were in university using Gmail and Dropbox, and that was perfectly fine. And they come into the work environment and they have to learn Windows and Teams and Office 365 and all these things. And it probably feels clunky compared to using their personal MacBook and Gmail and Dropbox. And so we find that people are stressed and they need to do something in a hurry, or they want to share a large document. That's when they slip into those habits of, and Gmail and Dropbox and those things. And doing all sorts of crazy stuff with their passwords. Like the password conundrum is unbelievable. We ask people, how many passwords you have in your work? How many do you have in personal? And, Gen Z has only been in the workforce a very short time. Guess what? They have the most passwords. More than any other generation.
I have no idea how many passwords I have.
Yeah, I bet you've got a lot. Most people have a lot. And if you actually count them all up, or if you use a tool for them,
right?
You have. Well, guess what Gen Z is doing? They're saving work passwords on their personal phone, and the personal phone,
like in a note type thing.
Just notes, not a password app, but just on notes. And we know that because we asked the same questions in 2022 and 2024 about how we know what percentage of people use an online password management tool, like LastPass or OnePass, and the percentage of people using those tools is dropping, and the percentage of people who are writing their passwords on their phone is rising, and putting their passwords in some kind of notebook is increasing, which is the craziest thing, right? And so, if you work in security, everyone in security knows passwords were a great invention back in the 1960s. So now they're the number one reason for breaches and hacks and compromises, compromised credentials.
Yeah. So for me, and so for our team, the ones who are doing the secure work, we buy them all LastPass. But for me, it's Safari, right? Stores or whatever, iOS stores those passwords for me. Yeah. And but what I think is interesting though is because somebody was complaining about the password security requirements at their organization. I'm like, well, don't you just store it all in your in a Safari, KeyPass and all that? They're like, well, yeah, but you have to get into the laptop first, and the password requirement is like 12 feet, 12 digits, and it has to have all the symbols, like it's the super secure ones. And I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that would be a bit hard to remember.
But that's where, embracing biometrics, Touch ID on a Mac or Windows Hello on a Windows device, that's the way to go. So you can actually move people going from the password less. So, I mean, we're already there with our smartphones, right? Most people use Face ID on an iPhone or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that works so well. We're so used to that. That's the experience we need to have on our laptops. Windows Hello on a Windows, Touch ID on a Mac, and then we're authenticating biometrically, which is way more secure. And then if we have single sign-on to our applications, we're not typing any passwords. And if we get away from typing passwords, we cannot get No one's going to trick your employee into typing their password into some dodgy browser window.
No, and so they're going to get tape with your fingerprint on it, and it's going to turn into some CSI. No, that makes sense. Well, so what are some of the things then, I guess, based off of the trends that in what you're hearing from employees, that employers should be doing then? How do they react to this data? What are the things they should be thinking about?
Well, one of the things, reframing the messaging around security, we think is a really easy, quick win. So what we found is we asked people, what's more important to you, your company security or your personal privacy? And it was on the preference for personal privacy. People really don't care that much about their company security. They really don't care that much. And we asked the question in a number of different ways to see if we could, kind of triangulate.
Right.
Well, on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it to you that your company data is protected? And what we found was older people, so the baby boomer generation, older millennials said, yeah, it's pretty important that the company data is protected. The younger generation didn't see it as important at all. And we asked the same question about your personal data. How important is it to you that your personal data is protected? The curve is the same. Older people cared immensely. Younger people don't care at all.
100%.
What's going on? And then we thought about and realized that young generation, Gen Z, we think they've already given their soul away to the devil. They've already basically done the deal with TikTok and Instagram and Facebook and said, you can have everything about me. You can have my location. You can have my entire social graph, all the people in my network, what I click, what I like, what I watch, what I listen to, how much time I spend on all these apps, what I buy, everything about me. And I don't care because I get to use this free app and I get to see what everyone else is doing and I get to see their worlds and their lives and so they've got this super casual attitude, personal data, and life's super casual that older folks don't have, and sadly Gen Z brings that casual approach to personal data into their employment, and so now a super casual approach to company data, and so when we see them and with their password behavior, writing down their passwords on their phones and their notebooks, we see them forwarding work stuff to their MacBook, using Gmail, using Dropbox, using their personal devices. We join the dots between a number of these things, and we see we've got some issues here. Clearly, we've got some issues that we need to tackle. And we see the problem is not them. We've got to be super careful, in my opinion, that we don't blame Gen Z for these issues. We're the adults that hired them, and we put them in a situation, and we're responsible to set them up for success. So I think it's really important we understand these issues and can address them before Gen Z becomes a dominant cohort in our workforce.
Yeah, so a couple of things on that. I was laughing, one, because that's the argument that my stepdad and I have. I'm like, why do I care if China knows that I like dance videos and music videos and leadership videos? Like, so what, And he's definitely of the nobody should use TikTok frame of mind, right? So we have this argument as well. But when I was working at the health insurance company. We were part of a Leading for the Future course, and we were trying to predict the future of healthcare. and what you could do with it. And really, I think that's I don't know as much about Gen Z, but about millennials is you give up data to make your life easier, right? And so you give up when you're thinking from a health perspective, like, you're giving a lot of data to these apps, and it's because, well, you get insights out of it, right? And so yeah, I kind of group myself into that group of people who's willing to give up stuff, um because I'm kind of like, well, why do I care? And there's probably good reasons why to care, and until something drastic happens, I probably won't change my mind though on it. um uh
I think it would, if you had an identity theft.
oh, that's what I mean. If something happened, exactly. Yeah.
And everything changes.
Because it definitely, I've had my credit, how they can steal your credit card number without like actually stealing your credit card, like in airports and stuff, when they can walk by you. I've had that happen to me multiple times, and that feels very violating. So if your whole identity was taken, yeah, that would be quite dramatic. But anyway, I do think that that part of the mentality, right, is it's like, I think some of the younger generations are just super interested in how all the data can come together and how they can then use that information to make their life better. And the episode that is right before this conversation, we were on with a cybersecurity guy, and he was talking about how we have to get to the mindset, because these newer generations don't have the mindset that me having your data, like from a company perspective, right? Like as an employee of a company, me having my customers' data is like a privilege, right? We don't, getting that across of like, these people have entrusted this information to you. It may not feel like a big deal. Like maybe we were talking about shampoo or conditioner or something on the last episode, right? Like it may not seem like a big deal if a hacker gets your conditioner database of who uses what conditioner, but it may matter to those individuals, right? As an aggregate, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but on an individual level, it may very well be.
Yeah. And look, it does. And healthcare is a really interesting one. I'm glad you raised that, because in the healthcare industry, people entrust their healthcare provider with their most sensitive and personal information. And so there's a massive responsibility there. But your previous question was around what can employers do?
Yeah.
And one of the key things they can do is reframe the security message with a privacy lens. Because what the research shows is people care a lot more about their personal data than company data. Right? It's like 70 to 30 is the preference. So we know now that if companies want to communicate to employees about security, the worst thing they can do is bang on about and use words like security and compliance and policies and audits and risk. The employees just shut down. Their brain
You
goes,
hear it all the time.
Yeah, it's very boring language. But if we flip it, and reframe it as a privacy message, if we say, Jana, we've got your salary information, we've got your home address, we've got your employment records, we may have some of your healthcare data. We want to make sure we protect that. And the same for your colleagues and everybody around us. We want to protect that. So here's what we need you to do. I've got your attention, right? Because I made it personal. But if I use words like risk and audit and compliance and policies,
right,
you're dozing off straight away. It's a very simple switch in the messaging and how we frame it, and gets people listening and leaning in.
Well, and what about in Australia?
In Australia, yeah. So we did the research in Australia, UK, and USA, and that preference for privacy over security was about the same in all countries 2 years ago. The difference now, 2 years later, is extraordinary. Australia prioritizes personal privacy over security by a much larger margin compared to the other countries. I think Australia was 81% personal privacy first. And we think it's because of Medibank and Optus and these big, very impactful breaches that happened in the last couple of years. They'd essentially changed the psychology of a nation and raised the awareness at a large scale, and in a way that has not happened in the US and the UK.
It's interesting because it's interesting actually to me more that it, like you said, that it's been in the past few years. Because one thing I've noticed about Australia, because I do spend 30% of my time there, is how employee centric it is. Like employees have a very employee centric view.
Yes.
And it comes from, their employment agreements to, the unions and like everything is about protecting the employee always at the expense of the organization. It's very difficult to do business in Australia in a profitable way. Um, and even to things like in the US, right? You have a go live happening and people work crazy hours and they might, for a month. In Australia, there is some of that, but it's more an exception than a norm, right? Like it's exception that somebody works a 70-hour a week, and even if they're salary, they might be getting time and a half because of it. And not to say that all of that's bad, but it's because I do understand those rules come in for a reason. But everything seems so employee focused there.
Yeah.
Um,
You're absolutely right. And we've got the same issue. We work in Australia and New Zealand as well as the US. And I spent most of my career in New Zealand and Australia. I got used to that employee first perspective and how hard it is for the company to actually get good results because you have to put your employees first in so many considerations. And then I moved to the US 7 years ago. Oh my God, it's so different. You can literally find somebody like that and say, sorry, it's not working out. See you later. No hard feelings. And the person just leave. And they don't feel bad about it because that's kind of normal in the US. There's no way you could even think about doing that in Australia and New Zealand.
No.
Multi-month process. But the US thrives because of that, because people can hire easily and fire easily, take more risk, lean into projects, invest heavily when something is going well, downsize quickly when things are not going well. You just get this more dynamic business environment, I believe.
Right. And I think you can balance the two. I know we're a little off topic, but I think you can balance the two because so my CFO is Australian and he's like, well, what happens if we ever have to downside? I'm like, well, we'll let the people go. We'll do what's right by them and give them, like, we're not in that position, but we're like doing risk analysis, right? That terrible word, risk. And I'm like, but we'll do the right thing. We need to have contingency that we do something right by them and give them a month or 2 months or something to help them. I go, but we'll just let them go because but you're right. In Australia, you have to have like a certain amount of nuts for a certain amount of service and you have to pay them out all their leave. And like it can cost you, $50,000 to let one person leave, like go. And so I guess where I was headed was that I think a company can still be employee first without being so employee first that you hamstring the company and push it potentially out of business.
Yeah. And we're trying to navigate this in our own company because we've got people in those three countries. And it's interesting watching some of my American leaders learn to understand and respect the culture in Australia and New Zealand. And they go down and spend time there and go, actually, it's really neat. It's really neat. There's a great vibe. They love the people. They love the energy. And then people from New Zealand, Australia come out and spend time in the States and they go, wow, everything happens so fast. And it's so dynamic and it's so boom, boom, boom. And so I think there's benefits both ways.
Yeah.
As long as everyone's open to learning and adapting and taking the best of the best.
Yeah, it's just too bad governments won't do that. Because to me, that's my biggest challenge in operating in Australia is what the government. So, like for instance, we have open PTO in the U.S. and we tell people that the encouragement is to do 4 weeks. So we give them guidelines, right? But it's open. You can, if you want to end up taking more than 4 weeks, you can, and all of that. And so we want to do the same thing in Australia, and we can't. So you have to do the 4 weeks of accrued leave and all of that, but. Anyway, I know we've gotten a little off topic, but were there other things that companies so we talked about devices, we talked about getting them interested in security by using language that centers around their privacy and extending that to the people they serve. But what else have you seen?
Yeah, I guess one of the other themes was that this whole theme of isolation, people working in the home office, experiencing their company through one or two or three screens, and that's it. We think a lot more needs to be done to improve collaboration and communication and be more inclusive and find ways to support people in using some of the new AI tools we got and smarter collaboration tools. We've got a long way to go to make people feel a part of an organization. Because the research shows, I mentioned before, company culture was last and second last in the hierarchy of priorities, last and second last. That's not good. And in today's world, if someone's working remotely, in particular a Gen Z worker, changing jobs now simply means I take a new laptop out of this FedEx box that arrived on my desk, and I take the old laptop and I put it in the FedEx box and I ship it off. But I sit on the same seat, at the same desk, the same couple of monitors, and I have my same lunch every day in my home office, and nothing changes, just a different laptop. And I'm talking to different people on Teams or Zoom. But the connection with people and with culture and with company has really been diluted by working remotely for so long. And we need to address that. We absolutely need to address that. So anything we do with or bringing people together or fostering initiatives that pull people in and connect them to our purpose, our mission, our values, our company, our culture. We need to do so much more of that before we hand over the baton to Gen Z to run our companies.
Have you seen companies who do it well, where people who are remote and they're connected to the culture?
Great question. No, we don't do it well. I'd love to say we do, but through the research, we've realized that there's a whole bunch of things that we need to do better, in particular in the US, where we got people right between Seattle and Southeast Florida. It's massive spread, and they hardly ever meet. It's really sad. But there's a ton of things that we need to improve. But I have not yet seen a company who's figured this out. It might be a topic of the podcast if I do come across leaders in this space, and maybe some of your audience will, put up their hand and say, "Hey, we've got something to share." But no. But I'll tell you what we did find from the research is that people are still inherently optimistic. 71% of people said to us they feel like their company is open to ideas to doing a better job in technology and putting people in and making things work with hybrid work. And I guess that's the key thing we take on this for employers is we know that we've gone too long now with hybrid work. We can't just tell people come back to the office. Despite what Elon Musk might say or think, or Jeff Bezos, we can't just bring people back to the office. The genie's on the bottle. So we really have to figure out how to make hybrid work. How do we make it work? How do we make it inclusive and sustainable and secure? And make sure that, our Gen Z employee in a remote home office who is, unofficially using their MacBook and Dropbox and Gmail and storing their passwords in security and doing all these things, that they're not going to get us hacked or reach our company data. We've got a serious issue there to make sure that we don't have leaks and breaches happening because of our outer perimeter that we can't see. It's out of sight and out of mind. How do we make sure that's not a ticking time bomb? Where people feel optimistic, which is great, because then we can drive change. If there's a positive framework, we can take people on a journey. And fundamentally, we believe that the technology is there. You're using Office 365. Most companies we talk to are using the whole Microsoft suite, or at least part of it. And we know if you use it well, and you've got all the parts integrated, you can have a very productive, secure environment. You can get that balance between security and productivity, and it all works. I feel as a company, we get that part right, the technology part. What we don't get right is all the social integration. People in different geos getting time together to build, substantial relationships. But the tech, it's there. Most of us have paid for the licenses, probably haven't turned it on fully and got it all working and it's smooth. It's not giving it smooth or no
Well,
employee.
it's hard. I mean, I know, we tend to talk to larger organizations on this podcast, and they have IT departments who probably understand, the intricacies of the solutions. But as a smaller business, that's one of my biggest complaints is I don't know what I don't know, right? Like I actually did a customer survey with like Microsoft hired a company and they like interviewed us on like what is our experience like? And I'm like, for me, yeah, I have a security person and I have an outsourced IT department, but I still make the majority of the decisions. And I don't know. I know why why I choose certain licenses, but I don't know what I'm missing in it. And I don't know, like two-factor authentication, like we've turned it on and everything, but for a while we didn't because it was just annoying, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, now that the data that we're using, we need to keep it secure, right? Like, so that's what motivates us is like, what do our clients expect of us and turn those on? But it's still hard to navigate the landscape as a smaller organization of what do you really need? What's worth the money? What's actually going to protect you versus what's just, you getting sold something because it's got the hype word in it,
Tech for tech's sake, but right, getting the right technology and getting it working for you to make the whole process smooth. And really you want technology to fade into the background. You kind of want it to be invisible. And in particular, we want security to be invisible. And that's one of the things we evangelize, make security invisible. So it's not enough. And we're not asking people to use VPNs and type passwords and have to think about, am I on the domain? Can I do this thing or not? These are ideas from the last century, literally the last century. And if we're still relying on them today, oh my God, we're in trouble because the hackers they're so far beyond all that legacy technology. It'd be like if you lived in a dodgy neighborhood and you were relying on the same old door locks you had 30, 40 years ago and you hadn't upgraded them, you got to get done. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah, absolutely. This has been a really fascinating conversation. What are the three things you want to leave top of mind with, folks?
I guess top of mind for me, as a society, hybrid work is here to stay. That's what we've seen from the research. It's not changing a lot. Perceptions are we need to do a lot more to make hybrid work and enable employees to be secure, be productive, and be cohesively part of an organization. So we've got so much work to do. We help with that as an organization, Mobile Multi, my company. We're all about enabling and empowering hybrid workers with the technology to get this right. And it can't be done. We haven't figured it all out. It's a journey. For all of us, it's a journey. We've got more and more people and clients and partners who are working in this hybrid configuration across geos and time zones and all that. So it's fun. It's fun, figuring it out and making it work. And we're very, very passionate about it.
Awesome. Well, how can people get in contact with you or learn more about what you do?
You'll find me on LinkedIn, Denis O'Shea, Denis with one N, D-E-N-I-S and O'-S-H-E-A. The company is Mobile Mentor. So mobile-mentor.com. You'll find me there and we're happy to have a conversation and see how we can help. See how we can help your audience make hybrid work.
Excellent. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you, Janet. Really enjoyed the conversation with you again. And as I said, we'll repeat the research 2 years from now. So then we can join 22, 24, 26, and we're going to keep doing it until 2032. So we can track Gen Z's evolution from entering the workforce into their first management role, leadership roles, and then see how the world is evolving. So
excellent.
Watch this space.
Yes, absolutely. Well, and to our audience, until next time, keep your organizations healthy.